about our future in the Asian century and also our future as a healthier nation. I'm happy to take questions.
What do you make of humanitarian refugee intake?
Well, I've heard these words from Tony Abbott. First, I would say Mr Abbott publicly supported the increase of the refugee intake to 20,000. Indeed, he was prepared to offer that in parliamentary negotiations. And as recently as yesterday, a member of Mr Abbott's team was out supporting a 20,000 refugee intake and saying the matter should be beyond politics. So what we've seen from Mr Abbott today is not only a backflip, but it's a backflip to some tired old policies that you'll actually find in the 2010 election documents that he put out.
So is Australia being peacefully invaded like he says it is?
This is inflammatory language from Mr Abbott. It's meant to cause fear and concern in communities. It's part of his campaign of trying to divide our nation and cause people to be fearful and afraid. We face a challenge with asylum seekers, there's no doubt about that, and we are working, guided by the expert report of Angus Houston and the team, to address this issue. And Minister Bowen's made some important announcements this week about our policies towards asylum seekers and refugees. But there's no place in this debate for inflammatory language and dealing with anything other than the facts.
The Victorian Premier, Ted Baillieu, has come out and said that the federal government needs to take action to deal with the increase of picket lines. Is the federal government going to do something, and what are you going to do?
We have our industrial relations laws in place through the Fair Work legislation. They have been the subject of review, and Minister Shorten is working through that. But I can certainly say this, as a Labor government, we will always support fair laws that treat working people decently. We will never endorse Mr Abbott's agenda of work choices, and we will never endorse a proposal coming from a Liberal Premier that tells us to go back to work choices. On picketing, that can actually involve state laws, so that's a matter for Mr Baillieu to consider himself about his own state laws. For us, we'll always make sure, as a Labor government, that there's fairness and decency at work for Australians.
Prime Minister, turning to the claims made by these discrepancies that he's claiming are in your story about this supposed slush fund.
Well, I've obviously seen all of the media about this. Let's be very clear about it. What this boils down to is that 17 years ago, I couldn't recall events that happened 2.5 years earlier. That's what it boils down to. And let's be very clear that the event Gordon issuing a mortgage, not a matter associated with any union fund or account. So I think that there would be plenty of people who would say, yes, looking back over 2.5 years, it's a bit hard to remember every piece of paper that's come across your desk. In fact, looking at this audience, if I asked people right now to give me an account of every piece of paper that came across their desk 2.5 years ago, I suspect I'd find an audience of people who would struggle to do so. What this all means is that this whole campaign of smear actually boils down to absolutely nothing.
So
we've had 20 years. We've had 20 years of this. We've had a campaign of smear and innuendo, and it all boils down to absolutely nothing. There has not been one substantiated allegation of wrongdoing put against me across the full 20 years and the whole campaign of smear.
So you didn't know about the March 93 document that has come out?
17 years ago, I gave my best recollection of events that happened 2.5 years earlier.
Is it possible you could have seen the document?
I can't take the matter further than this, and let's just apply common sense. If I asked you, if I picked a date, let's 17, 2.5, 19.5 years ago, and asked you about pieces of paper you saw then, let's just be sensible about it. 17 years ago, I gave my best recollections about something that happened 2.5 years earlier. Let's also be clear, this wasn't a file that I ran. I was not the partner in charge of it. I was not the solicitor operating it. And so I don't think that it's remarkable in any way that I wouldn't have full recall of documents that were on a file that I didn't run as a solicitor.
But the documents that were shown to the ABC have your name on it. Is that unusual for you not to see a document that has your name on it and for a junior to handle that?
Well, in law firms, of course, documents get handled by paralegals. They get handled way back when in those old days by mail rooms and the like. What I gave 17 years ago was my best recollection of something 2.5 years earlier.
Why do you think these accusations are coming about then? Why has this former colleague come out now and started to...
I would say this, really, we're dealing with events 20 years ago. No one has ever put a substantiated allegation of wrongdoing against me across 20 years. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition was on radio this morning and challenged on multiple occasions my recollection of events 17 years ago about something that had happened 2.5 years earlier, which actually is a recollection about a Slater and Gordon mortgage, not a matter involving a union account or a union fund. Now, really, you're going to say to me that you've hopped in your cars and driven from the CBD of Melbourne 30-odd kilometres over the Westgate Bridge and you haven't got any questions about jobs or the future of the Australian economy or the future of healthcare. We've had, obviously, asylum seeker policy issues.
Do you then agree with Bill Ware to invest its funds?
The superannuation funds, including industry funds, need to run under the guidance of the trustees. That's the point Minister Shorten had been making.
Just back on that matter though, in relation to the mortgage, were you in any way involved in the mortgage in question?
Look, you've seen the documents. They're now there on the public record, and what they show is, if you want to look at all of the documents, look at the answers that we provided to the 7:30 report and others yesterday. There is a question about a certificate of insurance, the conveyancing file that I was not the solicitor or the partner for. And what's the relevance of the question? Where does it take you? Well, precisely. You've rolled your eyes because it doesn't take you anywhere. We've got front page headlines about a matter in which there's no allegation of wrongdoing at any point, and apparently it's the stuff of front page headlines that 17 years ago I didn't accurately recall an event 2.5 years earlier.
You seem quite adamant that you're the victim of a smear campaign, but why do you think you're a victim of a smear campaign?
Well, I wouldn't use the terminology victim. I think, first and foremost, we've got the opposition trying to use these matters to cover over the fact they haven't got any policies or plans for the nation's future. We could be having a red-hot debate about the future of the Australian economy, but the opposition doesn't have a jobs plan. We could be having a red-hot debate about the future of government budgeting, but the opposition's going to refuse to put all its figures in for costing. We could be having a red-hot debate about the future of our schools, but the opposition doesn't want to engage in that debate, doesn't have a plan for our schools for the future. We could be having a red-hot debate about the future of healthcare, but I'm not aware of any opposition plan in that area. And so, when you don't have any plan for the nation's future, you've got to fill the airways with something. And we've had Julie Bishop's attempt today, and she couldn't even articulate a question I should answer.
Well, with all respect, though, it's not the opposition that's raising these issues, it's a former colleague.
And, of course, the opposition has raised these issues, as you'd be well aware. As I said when I dealt with this very, very comprehensively at one of the longest prime ministerial press conferences ever held, and took every question that the Canberra Press Gallery had to put to me until they had no more questions, as I said then, I expected that this campaign of smear would be continued by the opposition. It would be continued by some fringe elements that we've seen continue this campaign. It's a question for you about weighing the worth of it in today's agenda for the nation. So 17 years ago, something 2.5 years earlier, if someone wants to explain to me the importance of that for the future of Australia, then please have a go. I'd be interested. Sorry? The opposition is clearly engaged in a smear campaign. And I've named people in the past who were engaged in this. Larry Pickering and people like that have been engaged in, repulsive material being being circulated on the internet and through the so-called blog. And then we've got a question of whether or not this is dealt with and